What's up, people? Hotep Jesus. We are back with another uncomfortable conversation. Actually, this might be the most comfortable of the conversations I've had on this channel. I have a great guest today that is going to reveal to you a lucrative career to get into that really doesn't cost much to get into, and even potential of making 200K or better without a degree. But before we get into that, I just want to say I'm a 3-time tech co-founder, 2-time author, soon to be 3, working on a new book now on America, how we can heal America, wake people's eyes up to America, ultimate American red pill, coming soon. But in the meantime, you can connect with all 3 of my companies below. Coinbits app, shout out to Maher and Youssef starting that company, coinbitsapp.com. Basically invest in Bitcoin automatically. It's the easiest way to invest in Bitcoin. Don't need a wallet, don't need a tech degree, don't need to be tech savvy. Just need to know how to pull out your credit card or your bank account number so we can do an ACH transaction and turn that stuff into Bitcoin for you. And we hold it for you and watch that thing go up. Our guest today actually has an account with us, and we'll begin talking about that. Also, I'm involved with Wazo AI. We're developing software, does telemetry, people counting, recognition technologies with camera vision. Awesome project. Hopefully we'll have something for you guys July, maybe August, maybe September. Who knows? Something coming soon. And Gifitize, everybody knows Gifitize. It's the app we use to download GIFs and videos directly from Twitter. And like I said, I'm a 2-time co-founder. If you want to learn how to use Twitter, dominate Twitter at the link in the description box. Gives you all my secrets on how I grew my account and how I got into the Joe Rogan Experience. And also The Unbreakable Rules of Masculinity. Great book. It's not a pickup artist book. A lot of people say, oh, it's a pickup artist book. No, you haven't read it. If you read it, it's not a pickup artist book. You will score more women, but it's really designed to explain to you how women operate and how you can have better relationships with women, whether you're in a relationship or not. Without further ado, I'd like to bring my guest in, Mr. Mark Schneider. Mark, what's up, bro? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No doubt. So what's your experience with Coinbits app? How are you feeling the app so far?
I love it actually. I met Eric Finman. That's who introduced me to the app. I met him. It was about a year ago actually,
Okay.
and I love it. I've managed to. I was super excited because I crossed the one whole Bitcoin relatively recently.
Yeah.
Um, and it's. I think the best part about the app is you see how much you invest and how much it's made, and we'll talk about money later on in more detail as we talk about my experience. But at one point, as the pandemic hit, I was down minus like 25%, and I just kept hitting that $100 button, $100 button, $100 button, and it's been awesome watching it just climb back up. So I've really enjoyed that app. So it's one of my
Yeah.
favorite apps. I check it probably 3 to 5 times a day.
Are you
So,
serious?
oh yeah.
That's insane. That's insane. Yeah. When the pandemic hit and I saw those prices crashing, I think my big purchase was in around 5,000. I think I got it like 5,003 or something like that. And now it's past 9 somewhere right now. Yeah. So we made a good
Yeah,
piece
I'm
of
loving it.
change during that time. I'm like,
Yeah.
can we get another one of those pandemics?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a funny thing when you start getting into this level, when the stock market goes up, you gain money, or when the markets go up, you gain money. When markets go down, you gain money. It's a weird place to be where whatever you're doing, you're making money. So
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. When we talked about a lot of investing and, stock market had it crashed, they're like, aha, you guys are losing money right now. I'm like, no, actually, I'm celebrating because,
yeah, because
like,
I'm buying.
yeah, because I'm buying exactly. I knew we were in a bubble last year. We're probably still in a bubble. And I just hoarded a lot of cash. I was like, I'm not gonna make any stock market purchases. I'm just gonna chill out for a while. And I just hoarded cash. And when the thing hit, I'm like, the moment I've been waiting for. And it kind of shows you how people who invest think differently from the average consumer, where the average consumer would panic during a downturn and we're like celebrating, right? Like bad news is good news.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So my wife actually, her company, she got a relatively sizable bonus, and it came in right as the market was starting to slide, or the bonus came in, but a large portion went to her 401k, which had enough of a delay to where it literally hit right at the bottom of the market.
Oh wow. Oh,
Yeah,
excellent.
it's
Perfect.
been. I mean, our overall investments went down, but we bought at the premier time, if you know what I mean. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, so you do what? I put your website link if you guys want to connect with Mark. His website link is in the description box. Um, and you run this website now, and what exactly is happening here with this website?
So I have to talk about. I have two aspects of my life. This is kind of my hobby is the
Okay,
website, and I promote nuclear energy as a hobby, and in my daytime job, I work in nuclear energy. All right, so I'm a power plant operator at a power plant in Virginia, and basically, I'm a fancy guy that I'm a guy that just boils water in a fancy way. That's literally all a nuclear power plant is. It's just a fancy way of boiling water, right? We just
okay,
boil a lot of it, and so that's really all it is. And so that's really where we're going to talk about is primarily that. And again, I'm such a man of few hobbies and interests. My wife is also a nuclear engineer in the industry, so
okay.
I joke that we have the nerdiest pillow talk on the planet. Um,
I bet.
so, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a nuclear bliss here. But yeah, so and it's funny because I accidentally got into this.
Okay,
Like like I was in high school and I was an honor student, super nerd. I like Weird Al, or I listen to Weird Al and I like it. That's how white and nerdy I am. Shout out to his great single on that.
okay,
um, but so I was taking physics, and my physics teacher talked to us about this thing called the chart of nuclides, right? And this is like the nuclear power version of the periodic table. And I'm going to show you how big of a nerd I am because I have one on my wall. So I'm going to rotate my camera 90 degrees, and I'm going to show you this. And this is, I like to call this the decoder ring of the universe because it literally explains how energy is made in all the nuclear processes. So it's kind of a big chart. Each one of those boxes, right? They're like an inch square, and it's got each line is actually an element on the periodic table and every different type of element in it. So I saw that thing and I thought, man, this thing is super cool. And I'm like figuring it out, and I'm going, if I take these big elements and I'm just working this thing in my mind, and I go, this is really cool. I want to work in that. And so I'm like looking at universities, and I go, all right, university has to have a nuclear reactor so I can learn from it. So I'm researching that. And this is the late 90s. Um, and again, I'm a super nerd. So I played this game called Warhammer 40K. I don't know if you ever heard of it or not.
mm-mm.
Um, but my Navy recruiter actually worked or played that game as well. Again, another super nerd. And so I'm playing this game. And so I knew him personally. And he shows up to my high school, and he's got his table up, and I set up and I fill out the card. And this was my junior year. And then I get a phone call in July between my junior and senior year, and it's my recruiter Steve Fosdor. He goes, "Hey, Mark, it's Steve, or Petty Officer Fosdor." And I'm like, "Hey, Steve, you and I know each other. You don't have to use the formalities." And he goes, "Well, have you ever thought about joining the Navy?" And I sarcastically said, "Only if you have nuclear power." No idea that every submarine and aircraft carrier was powered by nuclear reactors. And I'm like going, and he goes, "Oh, do I have a deal for you?"
Uh,
And so I go through and I take the ASVAB, and I take this test called the NFQT, which is the nuclear field qualifying test, and I qualify for the program. And
so what's on that?
and then
What's on that test? You probably need some extensive science background.
yeah, you do. So there are multiple entries to join the Navy, and then the nuclear program has a smaller subset. You have to be less than 24. You have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to score above a 63 on the ASVAB, um, and then you have to pass this other test. This test, it's math, science. It's all STEM stuff, right? So I think it
Okay,
was algebra two, and you have to have algebra two. So having that background, you need that stuff, and you have to have a high school diploma. GED is not applicable. So all those are the requirements.
gotcha.
And so
So
I
you
take
passed
this
this
test.
test. Right.
Yeah, I passed this test, and then and then my recruiter, I learned something. They have a hard time recruiting people into the nuclear power program in the Navy, and that
Mm.
I counted as two people. So each recruiting district in the country has a quota of people they're required to recruit each month.
Okay.
I counted as two people because I was going to be a nuke.
Okay.
So
So he was
yeah,
happy.
and oh yeah, so he was happy. I took the Montgomery GI Bill and then something called the Navy College Fund on top of it. So it was $40,000 in education benefits. I went with that instead of the GI Bill plus an $8,000 bonus.
Mm.
Those bonuses today are 40 grand for
Mm.
signing. And if you sign and complete your school, you get a $40,000 bonus upon congratulations, you completed nuclear training. Here's a check for 40 grand. You're
Mm.
19 years old.
Wow. That's a big
So
chunk of change. Yeah.
yeah, so I went through and I did 20 years in the Navy, right? So I served on submarines, aircraft carriers. I advanced. Um, the nuclear power program has the biggest bonuses in the military. I got a, granted, my numbers are like, decades ago at this point. I got a
Right.
$45,000 bonus, a $60,000 bonus um, for reenlistment. And then when I became an officer, I received a $10,000 bonus every
Mm.
single year.
Mm.
Um, and then from there, I got out. I receive a pension. I receive a VA disability check. And I receive, because of the program I'm in, is a certified apprenticeship program. And according to the Department of Veterans Affairs, I receive a check from the VA for my GI Bill.
Wow.
In addition to my salary, I think I make $42 an hour right now, and I still have a couple of steps to go before I'm stepped out, as they call.
Okay.
And last year I made $120,000. This year I'll probably make about 130, 140. And and so my GI Bill money's tapering off and my salary is going up. But in a couple of years, I'll go through what's called license class and I'll get my license. So a step-out operator at my company makes about $46 an hour. And then I'll go through license class. I get my license. I get a $9,000 year bonus, an $8.10 an hour pay raise, right? So now you're talking in the $50 range. You work over 40 hours, you get time and a half. And then we also have double time. And if you work a holiday, you get 12 hours of straight time pay plus double time. So you're effectively getting triple time. So when we're at work, there are guys that literally go, I'm going to go take my $50 pee. So they're going to go pee and make $50, right? I mean, so, and I have my degree, and we'll talk about how much my degree cost,
Right.
but you don't need a degree to get into this.
Okay.
Um, the primary method that people get into this is through experience, specifically the Navy nuclear power program. There are other methods to get in, whether you worked at a different kind of power plant. So if you worked at a coal plant, you worked at hydrofossil, right? Any of those, and then typically what happens is they close down a coal plant and they got to go put you somewhere else. Well, you have power plant experience, you qualify, and because of union rules, you can get the job you want. And so we have a couple of workers that worked at coal plants, co-workers, and then there's another guy, and Carlos is awesome. Carlos, he started out as a contractor working outages. So every 18 months, you got to shut power plants down to do a bunch of maintenance on it. So he started out basically sweeping floors,
Mm.
and then he just started asking questions, learning things. And occasionally they'll bring up what's called a foundations class, where the power plant's going to sit you down in the classroom, teach you all the science and math fundamentals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go through and you learn it. Carlos now makes $46 an hour, and he started out sweeping floors, right? I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy that
Yeah.
this actually exists. Um,
Okay.
and so, and that's fascinating. And then when you get even higher, you get towards, my you get your senior reactor operator's license. Those guys are making 200 G's a year,
Mm.
right? And they not all of them have degrees. If you have a technical degree, you can get a $6,000 bonus on top of the 200,000.
Mm.
But I mean, I got guys that I work with that they started the power plant at 18 years old because their dads worked there. That's how a lot of these young guys got the jobs, is because their dads worked there.
Yeah.
And I was lucky. I had no idea. Funny story about how I got connected with the company I work for is that my wife's ex-husband, he does yeah, it it's he does he sets up hiring conferences. And so he did a veteran specific hiring conference. And I went there and I was talking with him, and he got me set up with the recruiter for the for the utility that then hired me. So
Wait,
there
wait,
are,
wait, wait, wait. Your wife's ex-husband knew you were her current husband.
yeah,
Oh, so he's
yeah,
just a
like,
cool guy.
yeah, he's a cool guy. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
it's like one of those things where it's like, it's one of those where we want him to succeed. He wants us to succeed.
Yeah.
Right. Because, the more money he makes, it's better for his son. The more money we make, it's better for his son. So why not be mutually beneficial in all that?
Okay,
Right.
gotcha.
So that's the behavior we take on all that. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just my pathway to get there. Now, I
Okay.
do want to talk about my degree, because I
All
know
right.
that I got a bachelor's degree in nuclear engineering technology for $286 out of my pocket.
That's insane. That's
So,
insane.
yeah, while I was in the Navy or the military in general has tuition assistance. So this is open to all members of the military while they're in. So they will pay your tuition on any classes you take. I took one class for my degree, and the rest I took were exams.
Mm.
So they had this program called CLEP, which is basically you go to a Navy, a college office, Army college office, whatever, and you sit down, they give you this test and say it's on humanities. And you take this test, you score above a certain amount. That university, the university, mine is Thomas Edison State University, they said, you got above a 50, congratulations, here's 6 credits in humanities. And then I had to meet residency. So Thomas Edison State University has their version of that exact same thing. The Navy paid for those tests. I took a technical writing and 2 physics classes to meet residency.
Okay.
And then the one class I took was which was on human performance management. I had to pay $86 for the book. So that's the first thing I had to pay for.
All
And then
right.
when I had all my credits done, I had to pay $200 for my graduation fee.
Wow.
Most of all my in-class credits, all the in-degree credits, were all based off of my experience.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
it was all based on the fact that I had, I was when I got it, I was a chief petty officer. So sergeant first class, for people who understand Army, it's, relatively high in the pay scale on the enlisted side. And so I worked through, and so my experience, all those things, they kept adding up. I kept adding credits. I think I had, at the time of getting my degree, I had 215 credit hours with the university
Mm.
because of all my experience.
Okay.
Right. And we're talking, I mean, I had, credits for seamanship. I mean, all my nuclear stuff, physics, math, chemistry, all the stuff associated with my nuclear training.
Yeah.
But I had electronics training because I was an electronics technician, nuclear type. And so all that stuff translated. It's not just the nuclear power program that Thomas Edison State University does this with. They have it with every single job in the Navy.
Okay.
So now, granted, you may not have enough for a bachelor's degree, but they have programs like that.
Okay.
So I got my bachelor's degree, and the Navy will pay for each level of degree the tuition for it. So
Mm.
you get your bachelor's, and then you can work on your master's, and you work on your doctorate. I
Right.
have friends in my program that they're getting doctorates in nuclear engineering that the Navy is paying for.
Okay. Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
yeah, and we don't, I'm in this, very academic group of people, very, very, intelligent group, but we're also the guys that, so if you were to take my community, the nuclear power community of the Navy, it's made up of predominantly 2 groups of people: the people that didn't do their homework in high school and got C's, and the people that drank their way out of college.
Really?
Yeah. So that's, it's this group of ragtag, bunch of people that, that's what they are. I mean, it's very extremely white, and I'm trying to hopefully, bridge that gap, help your community get into this. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's, nothing is racial about it,
Right.
that I know of. I mean, it's just, everyone can have these. And I have, I literally have examples. Carlos is a black man. Shatik is a man that I work with that he's got his SRO license, making 200,000 a year. Just got qualified shift manager. So
Mm.
he's pushing. When he gets a shift, he'll be making $250,000 a year,
Wow.
right? And he has his degree. I believe he has his degree. I don't know if he does. It kind of doesn't matter,
Right.
right? And And so there's all these great things. And one of the crazy things I've learned so much about the GI Bill, right, is there's a certified apprenticeship programs. Not every nuclear power plant in the U.S. has that. So just, I know for the company I work for, they own 4 different nuclear power plants. 2 of them are certified, the other 2 are not. But different companies have achieved that certification.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I learned is I went up to New York at the beginning of the year to talk with Anthony Pompliano. I'm sure you know who he is, right? We talk about nuclear and Bitcoin, going
Yeah.
back to our first conversation. And I met with a guy named Lewis. Now, Lewis is a former Marine, and he and a couple other guys from his unit, they were all getting out at around the same time. And one of them said, "Hey, we need to go to college in New York City." And Lewis and his other buddy, like, "What do you mean we need to go to college in New York City?" He
Yeah.
goes, "Well, the way the GI Bill works, specifically the post 9/11 GI Bill works, is that they pay for your tuition
Mm-hmm.
and they give you a stipend for books. And then you
Okay.
get E5 with dependent BAH, which for
Okay.
New York City is $3,000 a month."
Mm. Oh, I see what they're trying to do. Okay.
So they got an apartment for $3,000 a month
Yeah.
and split it 3 ways. So
Uh.
now they're making $2,000 a month on top of all of that, right?
Mm.
So they pay their $1,000 a month in rent, and then $2,000 a month they have to live large in downtown Manhattan in their 20s, going to college,
Ah.
right? And this is available to anyone who joins the military, right? It doesn't matter, Marine Corps, Navy, Coast Guard, Space Force. It doesn't matter,
Right.
right? And how many people know that? I didn't know that. Like I said, I got lucky. And
Wow.
learning more about this stuff, it's crazy.
If anybody's not familiar with New York City, to live in Manhattan, period, and you said downtown Manhattan.
I think he lived down in the southeastern portion. I don't remember.
Oh man.
I've only been there once, so.
Yeah, it's really expensive to live in Manhattan, downtown, especially down by Wall Street and Bowling Green. But living there is just a lot of fun. I haven't lived there, but I've worked a lot of hours in the city, and the city's a lot of fun. New York City's a lot of fun, and to live there, also you don't need a car in New York City either, right? You can
Yeah.
just subway everywhere, and you get there a lot faster. So yeah, man, I'm living it up. Okay, my bad. Go ahead.
No, that was great. No, that was a great explanation. And then the other thing that's really crazy about military service is that if you're looking for a federal job, they have, when resumes go into the HR database, they're put into 3 tiers. And the bottom tier, the people that that if no one else above them qualify for, then the resumes get sent to the hiring manager, right? And that's just the straight citizen off the street. If you're already a federal employee or a veteran, you're in tier 2, and then tier 3 is the disabled veteran. So if you're a disabled veteran, let's say there's 100 people that apply for a job, and you're qualified, and you're the only disabled veteran that applies for it, the hiring manager only gets your resume.
Oh wow.
And disabled veteran does not mean you're in a wheelchair,
Okay.
right? It's a rating system. Being a disabled veteran means you have a 30% disability rating. I was out working in my yard all day long. I have a 70% rating,
Wow.
right? And it's just from 20 years of service, right? I've got some back pain, I've got some knee pain, right? Things that are manageable,
Yeah.
right? Everything I have is manageable, but the Department of Veterans Affairs determines that I have a 70% rating. So therefore, I qualify for all these jobs. If I want a government job tomorrow and I'm the only disabled veteran, I'm the only one that gets it. Oh,
Uh,
and here's even better. If you know the hiring manager and you're a disabled veteran, he can name select you. He can bypass, so long as you're qualified, he can bypass the whole interview process and everything. You're a disabled veteran, you qualify for this job, I'm putting you in it.
okay.
So,
Okay. Wow. Wow. Perks on
and
top of
so that,
perks.
yeah, perks on top of perks. So that's one of the huge benefits of military service. And I mean, and it's amazing that if I'd have known all this stuff, and I've got two kids that graduated high school this year, and I'm like trying to beat this kind of stuff in their head, and like they don't want to listen. They don't want to listen to their dad. I don't know anything, right? Um,
Yeah.
but I'm hoping that maybe I can help someone out there go, oh, that's you can actually do this stuff. Yeah, you can. I mean, I know people that are doing it. These are all real stories that exist. And I was, one of my last jobs in the Navy, I was working contracts at the shipyard, and we'll talk about the shipyard too, because there's so many great things that are going on in the nuclear industry. But but I was dealing with these hiring panels, and I remember it was like, okay, getting these, I did a couple hiring panels, and it was always veterans, veterans or federal employees, every single one of them. It didn't matter. It was
Mm,
crazy. Every single one. It was consistent. Like
mm.
never did I see an off the street person get into them. Now, granted, I was working in the defense sector, so that's pretty common. I don't
Okay.
know if, say, it's Department of Treasury or, um, you know, Homeland Security. I know is also primarily veteran as well.
Mm,
Um, so I was working at that time. I was worked for the supervisor of shipbuilding conversion repair for Newport News Shipbuilding. So there's a government office there was like 30 military and 500 civilian employees that they do oversight for the shipyard that builds our aircraft carriers and half of our submarines. That company, nuclear industry, right? That company is hiring 2,000 people before the end of this year.
mm, mm.
And these are like, my wife just sent a job application to my son for to be a pipe fitter. No experience needed, right? He's 18 years old, just graduated high school. To be a pipe fitter, starting hourly wage $18 an hour for an 18-year-old kid. That's damn good money, right?
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
Especially down here where I live. That's not. I mean, that's pretty good money for being 18.
Okay.
So they're looking to hire 2,000 people because they've
Wow.
got multiple aircraft carrier contracts that are coming. So we're talking the Newport News Shipbuilding. Give you an idea. They build all our aircraft carriers. They do the midlife overhaul of all our aircraft carriers, and they decommission and activate them. So right now you have the USS John F. Kennedy is being built. So in 50 years, that ship's going to be decommissioned. This
Right.
company has, a long history or a long future going to it. The USS Enterprise or the PCU Enterprise is under construction right now in the dry dock. And then the Dory Miller, named after a guy that was a hero of Pearl Harbor, is the next one. They take
Mm,
7 years to build. So 14 years plus 50 years plus 4 years to inactivate, right? This company has 80 years of work ahead of it. So it's not like,
mm.
if you get a job there, they've got, a long standing, job. Plus, you know, I think the Navy just signed another submarine contract. They've got to replace all the old submarines with new submarines. Submarines only last about 30 years. So
Mm,
that's
mm.
all that's the majority of my stuff I have in a nutshell.
All
Um,
right. So yeah, let me so the first thing comes to my mind is nuclear energy is dangerous, right? We saw what happened with Fukushima, right? So am I wrong in saying that or what happened with Fukushima?
all right. So I like saying this. Fukushima was the largest industrial accident to ever occur in the history of humanity.
You said it was what?
Zero, the largest industrial accident to occur in human history. We
Okay.
blew up three reactors. We melted down three. A total of four destroyed. Right? They're
Mm,
they're operated in pairs. I'm not going to go into that detail. Zero people died. Right? There was a natural gas pipeline in April of last year down in North Carolina that blew up and killed three people. You
mm.
never hear about that, right? Right. So I mean, the nuclear industry now, and Fukushima, we're talking, the large nuclear scale or large scale disaster based on a 1960s designed reactor. So these were
Mm.
designed with guys doing back of a paper calculation, and they're using slide rules. The calculator hadn't even been invented yet,
Yeah.
right?
Shout to real quick, shout to Sketch Therapy in the chat holding me down and Kristen in the chat holding me down. Appreciate y'all. My bad. Go ahead.
No, it's great. So so yeah, Fukushima was a terrible accident, and
Mm,
I would say this: if you took what the industry did because of Fukushima, and if that was applied literally the day before Fukushima happened, you would have heard in the news that the earthquake caused the reactor to shut down. They had to use this extra system, this extra equipment called BDB Flex, and they're going to be shut down for about 6 weeks, and then they bring the reactors back online. So the entire industry has changed because of Fukushima, and Fukushima made us safer. It's a weird thing where you have these accidents, and it made us safer. You think about 3 Mile Island back in 1979. The common amongst the industry, and I actually know people who were like in the industry at that time frame, like because they work in it for so long. That they're like, it wasn't that 3 Mile Island, that plant was the worst. They just happened to be the one that had the accident. And the whole industry was, the 80s and the 70s and 80s of nuclear was, I like to refer to as the wild, wild west. I mean, you went down to every pressurized water reactor has what they call boric acid flats. They use boric acid to control it. And the stuff is a fine white powder when it dries. And it looked like, we joked that it looked like a cocaine factory, right? I mean, like, because it was just everywhere. You go down there now and it's extremely clean.
Okay.
The containment structure, the structure that holds in the event of an accident, would prevent, keep it all inside. So that's called the containment. They used to have a boat to get around in the basement of these things. Well, they fix that equipment and drain it out, right? So they actually, do maintenance. They improved. They created something called the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations. So basically, it's funded by the utilities to regulate the utilities, and their standards are higher than the government's. So, and if you walked into a pressurized water reactor, by the way, there's 2 types of reactors in the United States. There's pressurized water and boiling water. Those are the old legacy designs. If you walked in any pressurized water reactor, you can see their grades compared to every other type in the United States. So you walk in there, you say, say you're at Palo Verde. Well, Palo Verde, and it's by unit even. So Palo Verde Unit 2 is, at the top at this, as far as safety. Oh, but their fuel capability sucks. So they're down at the bottom. They had what's called a fuel limit failure, and they've had to, deal with a lot of repair issues in that regards. So they grade each other, and IMPO, these teams that go out to evaluate the sites, they're made primarily. You got the core group from IMPO itself, and then you're going to go and you're going to evaluate a plant that, say it's Diablo Canyon, owned by PG&E. Or you're going to have someone from Dominion. You're going to have someone from Entergy. You're going to have someone from Exelon that's going to staff that. So they're going to look for issues so that they can drive their own scores up. So it's literally using competition in an extremely good manner for that. And that's, it's fascinating what the industry has done to improve itself. If you go with the safety record, the nuclear industry is the safest power generation industry in the United States, and really worldwide. If you look at it, the wind turbines in UK, this is some weird statistic that I found, are killing over 1 person a month just from falls.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the wind turbines. And wind turbines are high on the safety scale compared to others.
Yeah.
And the nuclear industry is like, I think that the last death that the U.S. nuclear industry had for that was not of natural causes, a heart attack or whatever, was 1990 something.
Okay.
So, you're talking, they safety is a priority. I mean, you go into shift brief, it's opened with the safety topic.
Right.
Safety is a topic you talk about whenever you brief a job. The way that we walk around and do jobs, it's, I'm going to go turn this valve, right? It's simple. Some of our jobs are extremely simple. I'm going to go turn this valve, right? But I have to walk up. I'm 20 feet away from the valve. I pull out a card that's orange, and it says, all right, I'm doing my job site review. All right, I have this safety feature. I have this thing to be concerned about. I have this thing to be concerned about. Oh, hey, you that's walking by. Hey, that's a trip hazard right over there. Be careful, right? And then I walk up and I go, all right, I need to be, I walk up. And I grab my procedure and I pull up what's called the mark number. It's the little valve label that tells what it is. And I go, all right, this is 1FP36. 1FP36 It matches my procedure. I'm going to take it in the open direction, which is in the counterclockwise direction. I'm going to open. I expect the stem to rise. I'm going to hear the water flow. You literally have to verbalize this, even when no one is watching you.
Mm.
It's like acting on steroids. It's crazy. Like you overact everything. You walk up to a door. It's got signs on it. You go, all right. The sign says I have to have my hard hat, my safety glasses, and my hearing protection. And you check on it, right? It's a fire door. When I go through it, I have to check to make sure that it latches properly to keep the plant safe. And there are signs everywhere that you're constantly reading signs. A simple task that is just, oh, and by the way, before I even walked up to open that valve, my supervisor sent me out to go walk the job down. I had to go walk out there, check the valve out, make sure the site, make sure, maybe someone's out there and they're working on it. Hey, I can't go do this. I don't have access to it. Things like that. Because you're the eyes and ears of the supervisor making $200,000 a year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy when you look at it and you look at, if those kinds of principles were applied in, say, that natural gas explosion that occurred in North Carolina, they probably wouldn't have had that issue. So it is an industry with a culture based around safety.
So, so Fukushima, can you tell me what happened there and why? I guess the containment containers broke, right? They weren't containing.
So, yeah, so the containments themselves actually did their job. So,
Okay.
what you saw explode were the support buildings,
Okay.
and the explosions were hydrogen. Hydrogen gas was generated, and so we'll work backwards from that. All right. So the hydrogen gas is generated because of something that's called the Zerk water reaction. So if you take it's steam at this point because it's high temperature, we're talking 2,200 degrees. The fuel itself, they're in these long, they're like the thickness of a pencil, 10 feet long in these giant bundles. That metal coating that surrounds the actual uranium fuel is made of zirconium. And that zirconium, when it's in the presence of that water, it rapidly oxidizes and creates a lot of hydrogen gas, right? Think Hindenburg.
Okay.
So this hydrogen gas is being released, and the operators at Fukushima were venting it into the support buildings. Now, this is why I say 3 reactors melted down and 3 exploded, total of 4 destroyed. So you had a pair of reactors that they melted down. The hydrogen gas was being emitted into their support structures. They got it to the right percentage. They exploded. The other unit that melted down, its paired reactor was completely shut down, defueled its fuel in the spent fuel pool. And they were venting their hydrogen gas into the other support building so they could try to control it. The operators requested of the Japanese government to vent that hydrogen gas into the atmosphere and were denied. If they would have vented that hydrogen gas, there would have been some radiation exposure to the public. We're talking on the scale of a dental x-ray, right? You go to the dentist, you get 3 or 4 x-rays, right? We're talking one of those over a year's time frame, right? So very, very small amount of radiation. But the Japanese government were so concerned with that they told them no, and they had to bottle that hydrogen up. They got to the concentration, hydrogen, oxygen. Yeah, you got basically, that's rocket fuel. That's what the space shuttle used. The space shuttle used to use to launch.
Okay.
So yeah. So that's what happened. That's what happened in the end state to get to the fact that the reactor cores heated up so much was that the earthquake happened, and it shut the reactors down, and then they went onto the emergency systems. These emergency systems are typically underground.
Okay.
So they're below the sea level. They're underground, and that's for the purposes of a 9/11 type event. Someone ramming a plane in there. You want to be able to keep your safety systems online. So your most emergency systems are really low. And so when the tsunami hit, they were rated for like a 10-foot, and they were actually, the tsunami was like 12 feet.
Wow.
And so it actually washed it out. What you don't know about, you probably haven't heard about, is that there were 2 nuclear sites in Fukushima.
Yeah.
Fukushima Daiichi, 6 reactors, and it destroyed 4 of them, 3 meltdowns and 3 explosions, total of 4 destroyed. The other pair were defueled. Fukushima Daiichi, which is further south, it actually was able to recover because they were rated for like a 13 or 14-foot tsunami. So they were built later. Daiichi means in Japanese means 1, Daiichi means 2.
Okay.
So and those safety systems washed out, and so they weren't able to get the what's called core cooling. When you shut down a nuclear reactor, it's not like, when you turn off the stove, you stop adding heat. Well, in nuclear power, you have something called residual heat. So you split an atom, right? You take a uranium atom and a neutron hits it and it splits, and now you've got 2 fission products. They're angry, and they're excited, and they have to get rid of this energy. They get rid of this heat and light. Right. Well, when you shut down a nuclear reactor, your power output, we measure it in percentage, right? So if you're 3,000 megawatt core, 100%, you're generating 3,000 megawatts of energy. When you shut it down, you have initially, and it drops off over time, but you have 8% of your energy in residual heat.
Okay.
Each one of those reactors, those 3 reactors, by the way, power wise, is equivalent to, let's see here, 15 aircraft carriers of energy.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Insane.
they're huge, right? So their residual heat is 2 submarines of power
Wow.
at full power, right? And
Yeah.
Navy reactors only operate about 30% on average, just because they cycle their power up and down.
Okay.
And so that residual heat is what caused that temperature to get up to 2,200 degrees that caused that reaction. So there are 4 reactors in the United States that are testing accident tolerant fuels. They're eliminating that outer zirconium layer, and they're replacing it so you can't have that reaction. And it's actively being tested right now.
Okay.
For 4 reactors in the United States. There's other fuels that they're designing where the pellets are going to be so substantial, the actual fuel pellets themselves are going to be able to handle never melting down. So, yeah. And then when you get into some of the new design reactors, is that they can actually handle full-on events without a meltdown. And we actually know this is true. So in 1986, there was an experimental reactor known as EBR2, which stood for Experimental Breeder Reactor 2. It didn't use water as a coolant. It used molten sodium. So sodium, like you have table salt, which is made of sodium and a chloride atom. So it's a metal. Sodium is a metal when it's when it's by itself, and they heat it up to the point of being a liquid. And they actually put it through a worse than Fukushima event. So they were online. They overrid their safety systems, and then they basically shut off the cooling, which is basically what happened at Fukushima. They lost their cooling. The reactor shut itself down in 5 minutes on its own. It jumped to a temperature and stayed there because metal conducts heat so well.
Okay.
Right? So it basically, that heat from that fuel is just being transferred all the way out rapidly.
I see what you're saying.
Right?
Yeah.
Steam makes a blanket, and steam makes a blanket, holds that heat in, right? You put your blankets on as a cover, but if you're lying, like you lie in that cold, like a cold steel floor, and you could just feel the sucking the heat out of you. That's basically what happened. So, and there are reactors being designed to do that. And this one thing where the Russians are actually ahead of us, they have a large scale commercial reactor that runs on this. And when you start using different fuels, this Russian reactor is using nuclear waste for fuel.
So they're recycling.
They're recycling nuclear waste right now.
Wow. The Russians are something else, man.
Yeah. Well, and we're working on that. We have
Right.
companies that are out there working on that. It's what is in store for the nuclear energy. You've got me switching hats from my job to my advocacy now, which is a
Okay.
lot of fun because I love talking about all this stuff.
All right.
But the different designs that are coming out are super cool. Like, whether it's, and they're all basically going away from water as their coolant, but it's like some of them are super small. So, and I like pushing. There's a company called Oklo, and Oklo literally, the whole U.S. shut down for the pandemic, and they
Mm-hmm.
said, "Here's our license submittal." So they submitted their license to the US NRC to get their reactor design, which is a new advanced design, and it's
Yeah.
going to run on its initial fuel load is the waste from EBR2.
Mm.
So we're going to recycle waste in the US,
Mm.
and but their reactor is 1.5 megawatts, which is about enough to power about 1,000 homes,
Mm.
and it'll fit on a quarter acre. That's like your standard parcel in a
Mm-hmm.
suburban community.
Yeah. Yeah.
So quarter acre can't melt down.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really cool. Their design is super cool, and there's lots of them out there.
All right. Last question on Fukushima. They said there was a leak, right? And you may have answered this already. I may have missed it. What exactly was leaking into the ocean
All right, so there was a lot of water that they had to pump
to try and cool?
into the to try and cool it, right? So they're pumping
Yeah.
in water, and so you do have there was leakage that occurred because of that, right?
Mm.
Which is you know you're talking absolutely large quantities of water here. And so in the industry, we refer to it as dilution as a solution, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really the isotope of concern is what's called tritium. If we go back to my big giant crazy chart, the decoder ring for the universe,
Mm-hmm.
there's 7 different types of hydrogen,
Okay.
right?
Wow.
You
Okay.
go to a periodic table, right? Got hydrogen all the way up in the upper left hand corner,
Yeah. Number one.
right? Yeah, number 1, right? Well,
Yeah.
there's 7 flavors of it on my chart, right? So all that tritium is just fancy hydrogen, right? So
Okay.
right, so it's number 1 on the chart because it has 1 proton.
Right.
There's 7 different types of tritium because there's one with just a proton, and there's one with 1 neutron, 2 neutrons, 3 neutrons, all the way up to 6.
Hey. Okay.
So tritium, and this is the scary word, is just a proton with two neutrons attached. It's a type of hydrogen.
Mm.
It exists naturally in the world. It's
Mhm.
created in the upper atmosphere from radiation bombarding the planet from the sun.
Yeah.
We also generate it in nuclear reactors. So I
Mm.
always joke, and I'll say this: I'm drinking my wine here because I'm white as sour cream, but there's tritium in this, so I'm gonna toast you with some of my tritium here.
So, do
So
we have something to fear? Because obviously, there's a certain amount of doses that someone can can take, right, and can resist,
yeah,
right? So
so
are the sharks going to grow like 3 eyes now, or
no, no,
okay,
it's not. I mean, when you're talking the overall dosage that the sharks are going to get
yeah,
with the amount, when you dilute it out there, I mean, we're talking over their lifetime, they're going to receive maybe 10 millirem of additional radiation. And for context, you get somewhere between 150 and 500 millirem in a year,
okay,
right? So we're talking, 10 extra over their lifetime, right? A shark lives, say, 30,
mm,
40 years. It might get
mm,
10 extra millirem.
mm.
Um, and I like trying to use that comparison. Uh, and
So
it's
we don't
it's
have
it's
anything to
interesting.
worry. We don't have anything to
No,
worry about then. Okay,
no, you don't have anything to worry about. Like
okay,
it's funny. I watched there was an article about Fukushima, and I'm not afraid to talk about the accidents, and I actually like talking about them. There was an article where they talked about that so and so was on this dangerous area, and they every article will switch up the units on me.
okay,
Right, you can measure radiation like 40 different ways, or there's a unit, 4 different units for it. So I go
okay.
through and I pull out my little calculator, nerding it out, and I find it, and I go, that's 10 millirem an hour. I'm like, you can stand there for a year and never get radiation sickness. Like,
Wow. Yeah,
like,
because you say it to a layman, and I'm just like, wow, that's got to be a lot, right? Like we don't know anything about these sciences, right? So it sounds like a lot to us, but if you're a nuclear guy like yourself, you're saying it's not even that bad. If you were standing right next to the Fukushima plant,
yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I mean, that's what I love about talking about this is that trying to find that layman's term. And uh, if your followers connect me, I have 6 tickets to a discussion on nuclear energy that I'm going to be part of on Tuesday. And my specific topic is to how to translate this into layman's terms, right? And that's probably the biggest challenge of the industry, right? And trying to explain it, using details and pictures and simplify, 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 right? I mean, I went really technical. And it's easy to get really technical. Our mutual friend Scott Adams had me on,
Okay.
and my very first, one of my very first podcast experience, and he goes, "I want you to explain to me what happened with these." And I said, "Water," and he goes, "You're being too technical." And I'm like, "Damn, I really have to change my game on all this stuff." So
Uh,
I have been practicing and working on it, and that's what I love about stuff like this is that I can come up, with a guy like you and say, "Hey, how can I bring this out, teach people about it, and they can become experienced with it." Um,
yeah.
and I have a lot of fun with it. And I think I was working one night, and I was getting ready to go into our containment. We were in an outage. We shut the reactor down, do some maintenance on it. We have to wear what we call protective clothing. I'm literally dressed. I've got my hard hat that's got a cover on it. I've got a hood on that's covering all but my face. I've got a suit that covers up. I've got gloves on my hands. I've got booties over my feet, and then I've got rubber insoles over those. And then I've got my ridiculous, COVID required mask. Even my my dosimeter, the thing that tells me how much radiation I'm going to be getting, it has PPE. My flashlight has PPE. Like, it's ridiculous, right? We
Yeah.
have these covers, and I sent it to Scott, and he quoted out there being like, um, get back in your penis suit." Management probably, and then I realized, like, oh yeah, you put me all in one color, and I'm wearing a hard hat. Yeah, that totally. Yeah, I look like a giant penis right now. Um,
So you said you have 6 tickets. You technically have 5 because I'm taking one of those.
you're taking one of those, all right?
I'm taking one of those. How can people access these tickets for this Tuesday event? And what time is it?
If let's see here, I will have to look up that time. I don't remember. Oh, I'm
That's
bad
fine.
at that. Um, if they want to, my DMs are open on Twitter. They can just shoot me a DM on Twitter, and I will give them the link. It'll be the first 6, and I will ask for more because they told me I could get more, and if I get more,
Okay.
then the next ones in the queue will get it.
Okay. Awesome. Good job. So, your website and what you do as a hobby. Tell me about that.
So what I do as a hobby is I'm promoting nuclear energy, and I'm taking it from a different stance than a lot of people. If you look at nuclear advocates, they come in 2 flavors. You've got the environmentalists and you've got the engineers, right? Environmentalists don't understand the technology. Engineers or don't know how to speak human. So I'm neither of those, right? I'm an operator. My degree is in nuclear engineering technology. The technology means that I actually put my hands on things. So, there was the blue collar guy. I clean, in the Navy, we call them shitters, right? I've cleaned, toilets and scrub floors. I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. I'm not afraid to get sweaty and all that stuff. Whereas, the engineers, you think pocket protector. Yeah, that's what we are in our industry. A bunch of guys, pocket protector, super nerding it out. And so I see my role as kind of a translator and all that, to take these large engineering concepts and translate it into, the English language, because we don't speak English.
Yeah.
We speak some weird nuclear speak that, trying to explain it to people is extremely hard. And we pick the
Yeah.
worst words. We pick the absolute worst words. Like, if I were to tell you a nuclear reactor is critical, what does that mean to you?
A nuclear reactor is critical. I would say that means it's probably breaching some sort of limit.
In our industry, that means it is stable and safe.
What? Okay, that makes sense. All right. So yeah, you guys are
Yeah.
definitely speaking another language.
Yeah. So I mean, now when you talk about it, there is a moment, and and the reason why it's called critical is it was the critical moment in bringing a reactor online, meaning that it is creating its own neutrons, and so
Mm,
it's creating as many neutrons as it's using. So that's why
mm,
it's called the critical moment. It
mm.
became from the word critical moment. They said, "Oh, this is critical." Some nerd in the '50s called it that, so we're stuck with this stupid word.
I
So
gotcha. Wow, wow, wow. So you basically take your hobby is to take this technical jargon and turn it into layman's terms.
yeah.
Interesting, interesting. So, how do you do this? Is it like through online classes? You travel and tour and do this, or is it a combination of both?
So I do. I was doing Periscope, but with COVID, I typically try to do it when my family is at home. But my wife's been working from home. I'm thinking about jumping onto locals and then doing
Okay.
some more detailed content, and then just doing a subscription charge for a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about doing that. I have done a lot of Periscope. I used to use Periscope as my big way of doing it. Um, but I do travel. I do podcasts like this. Yeah, I did the Anthony Pompliano. I've been on with Scott a couple of times. I did went to the Phyllis Schlafly event as a speaker. I did a collegiate thing up in uh, Washington D.C. And so it's just primarily a lot of podcasts, the biggest thing, radio interviews, all that stuff, just trying to, explain this stuff in a manner that works. Um, and so that's my biggest method. And then, yeah, so that's kind of what I do. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I have to admit, I have a lot of fun doing it. And I really appreciate these conversations over talking with my own industry, because my own industry is really excited to talk to each other,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not. I could not imagine any other advocate coming on with Hotep Jesus. Literally couldn't even imagine it,
Yeah,
because
it's
they
definitely.
yeah,
Go ahead.
and it's fun. It's fun because you're going to ask these questions, and when people ask me, what are the issues that people have about the nuclear industry, I was talking three things: waste, weapons, and meltdowns, right? And you have to answer all three of those questions over and over and over again. And literally, I was talking with one of my fellow advocates, and he had the libertarian candidate on his podcast, and he wanted me to tweet it out. And I'm like, I'm not tweeting this out. You didn't ask her any hard questions. You didn't ask her any hard questions. You asked her,
Okay.
you softballed all your questions, and you didn't, waste, weapons, and meltdown. How is she going to explain to the American public how waste, weapons, and meltdown, and how you should not be concerned with that? And he goes,
Mm.
well, that's just a red herring. I'm like, you mean the three biggest issues that the public has is a red herring? No, that is the problem.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think
So
nuclear energy, I think, danger. Daniel Hawk, $5 super chat. He said, liquid fluoride thorium reactor technology would change the world. What are your thoughts on that? I have no idea what he's talking about.
um so so he's talking about a molten salt reactor. So different coolants, right? We're talking about
Sodium,
we're going away.
sodium as a liquid. Okay.
Molten
As a hot
sodium. So he's
liquid.
talking is a hot liquid, yeah. So there's liquid metal and there's liquid salt. The what he's talking about is a liquid salt reactor. So that's one aspect he's talking about is the lithium fluoride salt, right? So sodium chloride is table salt. This is just a different kind of salt, right? Heat it up, it actually flows and looks like water when you get it hot enough.
Okay.
And then the other thing he's talking about is thorium as a fuel. So there's three principal fuels that we use in the nuclear industry. You've got uranium, which is what every reactor in the United States uses. You've got plutonium, which is what the reactor out in Russia is using, and one that's running off of waste. That's the waste, by the way, that everyone's concerned about is plutonium. So it's just fuel for a different type of reactor. And then the
Mm-hmm.
third one is thorium. And so thorium, literally, you walk outside your house, you scoop up some dirt, you're going to find some thorium, extremely abundant.
Mm.
Um, and it's just another heavy element. You have to you have to transmute it, is the term. You have to turn it into uranium, a different kind of uranium. But what's fascinating about that is that instead of having the fuel and rods, I can literally put my fuel into the coolant, and it's just a liquid. And so I
Mm.
can keep adding fuel. I don't have to worry about shutting the reactor down to add fuel like we do now.
Mm-hmm.
I can just keep adding small amounts of fuel into it and just
Mm.
keep the reaction going. That's
Mm.
a great comment. And he covers my basis. If you don't do a podcast talking about nuclear and you fail to talk about thorium, you're going to have the cult of thorium come after you.
Okay.
So I appreciate that comment. That's things that I deal with in my industry is I have to talk about Chernobyl, I have to talk about Fukushima, and I have to talk about thorium.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have your cultist following. And if you want to talk about Chernobyl, it was a bad design. Government was too involved in a test. They didn't have a containment, and so they blew the thing up and killed 31 people. So
Okay. So what about the after effects now of Chernobyl, and it created this desert, right?
Yeah, by desert you mean lush green forest.
Is that true?
Yeah.
So it's not true
And
that the plants are all dead out there and they can't grow. That's a lie.
no, it's
Oh
like
my
it.
god.
Oh yeah. There. Have you ever watched the series Life After People?
No.
So there's a series where basically they take different
Where's this?
aspects
Is
of
this on
humanity.
Netflix or something?
It was on the History Channel.
Okay,
I,
got
I,
you.
I, I was watching it 10 years ago,
Okay.
but the series was based off of a documentary on the exclusion zone of Chernobyl. So the exclusion zone of Chernobyl basically, and one of the things they did was they followed a cat.
Mm-hmm.
They followed this cat around, and this cat, is hunting, and it's going inside and outside the exclusion zone, and is ultimately adopted by a family at the end,
Okay.
having no idea this thing is living in a radioactive forest,
Yeah.
right? But the cancer rates amongst the animals are in line with those that live outside the exclusion zone, right?
Okay.
So it's a lush forest, like the town of Pripyat, which was the city that was next to it that basically staffed the power plant.
Right.
It like is being overtaken by the forest.
So what does it mean then that this thing is radioactive? That doesn't necessarily mean bad, or what does that mean?
It means it produces radiation.
Okay.
That's what radioactive means, right? So I talked about that neutron hits the uranium atom
Mm-hmm.
and it splits, and
Mm-hmm.
they're energetic. That's all
Mm-hmm.
that. That's what I'm saying. They're highly angry. That's what
Right.
radioactive means,
Right.
right? So tritium is radioactive. It wants to release energy.
Right.
So it releases energy in a variety of different ways. We won't get into the details on that, but there are radioactive things everywhere in our world.
Mm-hmm.
Banana is a common thing that people eat for breakfast. Did you happen to eat a banana this morning?
No, but I've eaten plenty of bananas.
Yeah, it contains potassium 41 or potassium 140. I can't remember. Don't quote me on the exact one, but it contains a radioactive form of potassium,
Mm.
and you've consumed that, and you don't
Mm.
know anything about it,
Mm.
right? You will get more. I would bet that you would get more radiation on the flight to the Ukraine or to Ukraine. Sorry, it's Ukraine. The Ukraine takes away their sovereignty. On a flight to Ukraine, you would get more radiation from that flight than a trip and then a visit to the Chernobyl control room.
Wow. Wow. So, I'm sure there's a Netflix documentary on Chernobyl. I haven't got a chance to watch it yet. And you're basically saying this was just some sort of mismanagement and lack of understanding of nuclear energy.
Yeah, so it was a large series of errors. You have a poor design. Just their design is flawed. The RBMK is the design. It's just a horribly designed reactor. It didn't have a negative feedback loop for temperature, meaning that when temperature rose in our plants, that causes the power of the reactor to go down. So it
Mm.
develops a stable equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
As temperature rose in the RBMK, it causes power to go up, which causes temperature to go up, which causes power to go up, right? And
Mm.
so you see
Mm.
that cascading effect,
Yeah.
right? So horrible design. They
Yeah.
didn't have a containment structure. So if I took an RBMK reactor and I stuck it in a U.S. containment, and we underwent that test and had that exact accident occur, the reactor would have exploded inside the containment structure, and the containment structure would have held everything in place.
Mm.
So you have flawed design, failure to design a safety feature around it, and
Mm-hmm.
then they ran this test that wasn't being run, and not only was the test, it was. We'll get more detail about the test because I think you'll find that fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was other. There are other plants that had RBMKs. They all declined to do it. They still there are a few still operating in Russia. All the ones at Chernobyl were shut down by the 90s, I think. Um, but these other plants refused to do that test.
Mm. Mm.
So, so the test was being refused, and basically they found a KGB agent that basically pushed the plant to do it.
Wow.
So, and here's what's funny about, or what's, yeah, we'll say funny. Here's what's funny about that test. The idea behind the test was in case the United States attacked one of their power plants and blew up the switch yard where the power goes out to the grid. how would they respond as the turbine coasted down to keep the reactor from melting down?
It wouldn't matter at that
So
point if you're being
yeah,
attacked.
yeah. So this is basically so what they're doing is they're trying to bridge the gap until those bunker safety systems came online.
Oh,
Is
okay,
they're
right, right,
allowing
right.
the so you kill the grid, right? The reactor's going to trip, and then you have the big turbine, and
Okay.
it's gonna coast down, and they want to use that energy that's being generated to power the systems until their emergency diesels would come up online
Mm.
and keep the reactor safe. So
Hmm.
literally, it was a safety test that turned into the biggest nuclear accident ever in history.
And it exploded.
It exploded, but it was not a nuclear explosion.
It was a heat explosion.
It was a steam explosion.
Okay. Uh,
So if you take a jar, right, and don't ever do this at home, but you take
mm,
a jar, you put some water in it, and you put it on a burner, right? It's going to get hot
yeah.
and it's going to explode. Well, I said that heat, it kept getting hotter and hotter. Well, you get to a
Mm.
point where you cannot keep that as water, and steam takes 19,000 times the space of water. So that's a lot of rapid pressure. And
Yeah.
so it blew up, and literally, you think like a tin can is the actual reactor vessel.
Uh-huh.
It blew the bottom out, and it
Uh,
blew the top. The lid flipped like 3 or 4 times and then landed back down.
oh wow. Oh my God, that's crazy. Um, Daniel Hawk said Nagasaki and Hiroshima don't look like Minneapolis right now. Radiation is not dangerous. Nagasaki and Hiroshima, what was that, Big Boy and Little Guy or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. Little boy and fat man.
Little Boy and Fat Man, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the bombs we dropped on it. He said, don't look like Minneapolis right now. Radiation is not dangerous. We're going to have to talk about that. He also said, no safe threshold policy of radiation has created fear in the public to the detriment of the nuclear industry. So let's talk about Fat Man and Little Boy. Um, Now, that bomb that we created, um, the radiation wasn't what killed the people. I guess it's the explosion itself is what kills people.
So,
Because they
so in
talk
this
about
case, yeah,
cancer rates afterwards too among the Japanese.
they do. So what you have here is you have, a large scale, basically radiate. So it's a combination of heat, light, energy, and a lot of that is radiation that comes out. And then you have those fission products. A lot of those are extremely radioactive, right? And so we don't want that. And when you're looking at the quantities that occurred in that, so they detonated it, and immediately following, so the generation, the boomers, basically um, took all of it,
Mm.
right? After about really you know 20 years, 20, 30 years, all those radioactive constituents that would cause all that are gone.
From just erosion and
Just decay, right?
decay.
So when
Okay.
that when it releases the radiation that causes, that is the potential cause of that cancer,
Hmm.
that's it becomes a stable state, and it becomes no longer radioactive, or it switches to a different element and it's less radioactive. So it's giving off that energy.
Mm.
So what he's talking about is Hiroshima and Nagasaki today are extremely beautiful cities that are well maintained. My wife lived in Japan for 6 months before I met her, and she said it was absolutely amazing going and seeing these cities. You've got there's the temple that was literally directly below the detonation that's
Mm.
still partially standing, and it's
Mm.
it's not it's unchanged.
Mm.
But the whole city is just vibrant. Um, and one of the things that you'll find when you have some kind of incident is when you start looking for specific types of cancer, you'll see an elevated rate, not because the cancer is unhealthy, but because you weren't testing for it, and now you're
Uh,
testing for it, right? So now
uh,
you're creating, kind of your own dialogue or your own story with that, because you may not have developed and say, oh, they've got thyroid cancer. Well, they may have had a low level thyroid cancer that the body would just manage on its own. And by the way, there are studies that will show if you have too little radiation, that's just as harmful, if not more harmful for you than more radiation.
oh my God. Mark, you blowing my mind tonight, man. Yeah, I really don't understand this nuclear energy. Somebody in the chat said nukes don't exist. Is that true?
Um,
What is he? I
I,
don't know what
I
he's trying to say with that.
I wonder if he's talking about weapons because I slept between them.
Yeah, he's probably talking about weapons.
Yeah, I slept between them. They exist.
I have another question here that popped up in the chat. Let me find it. It had a whole bunch of numbers in there. Ah, wait, I passed it. Um, Shout out to Sketch Therapy holding me down. He's a phenomenal job. Um, so let's talk about Uranium One, right? There's a Uranium One deal where I believe Hillary Clinton was involved in selling some uranium to the Russians. What's going on with that deal?
All right. Most of my right wing friends do not like my answer to this.
Uh oh. Uh oh.
Most of the fuel that the United States is using, we purchased from Russia because they did the hard job for us. They enriched it for us and they made it into weapons and then we bought it. So by selling it to them, we're basically using them as a service to make the, and by the way, that uranium is that high of concentration
Yeah.
is useful for the US. We'll what's called down blending it to put
Okay.
it into our own reactors. And then the US military uses a much purer grade of uranium than the commercial industry uses. So
Okay.
they do all the hard work for us.
So we're sending them something to process.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
Okay.
As we are getting our own processes up, right? Because of this giant purchase that Reagan made in the 1980s, we shut most of our ability to enrich, that's the technical term, the ability to get the uranium at a level that we need. So we have to get those services back up. So by selling it to them, the Russians can do that, and then we can purchase it from them. We are getting
Mm.
that stuff back online, and we'll be
Mm.
able to do that again. But Uranium One, I'm going to tell you, it's a pretty much a non-event from my perspective.
Mark, come on, man. You keep shattering my hopes and dreams, man. You shattering all my conspiracy theories. Oh my God. I feel like such an idiot because I've been talking about a lot of this stuff over the past years. Like, oh, Fukushima is dangerous and uranium one. And you're like, you're fake news, Hotep Jesus. I found the other question. He says, ask Mark about energy fuels, SYMUUUU, and the upcoming uranium bull market. Currently, we import 100% of our uranium, but some say that will change. What is he
So I'm
talking
not
about?
specifically sure what that acronym he's talking about is, but as far as uranium bull market, the president and the Secretary of Energy and the Undersecretary for the Office of Nuclear Energy have signed decrees to bring nuclear mining and processing back to the United States. So that is going to happen. There's a mine out in Western Virginia that's potential. They're all over the place. So we're going to bring uranium mining back to the United States, bring some of that manufacturing. Right now, most of our uranium comes from Australia, and there's a couple other places as far as the source uranium. So that's the big thing with that. As far as uranium bull market that is coming, when you look at it, currently right now there's 460 operating nuclear reactors around the United States that all run on uranium as fuel. There are 55 under construction. I believe that a reactor in the UK is about to be approved. Egypt's about to build 4. These are not on the list of to be built. Uh, India is supposed to build like 20. The president of Poland and President Trump just signed an agreement to build nuclear in Poland. So there is if you look worldwide, I think the 53 reactors and you take their average power level and the amount of power they're going to generate, it's like, and you compare it to the renewables. This is the big thing that the renewables talk about. There's actually more energy that's going to come out of those reactors under construction than all the renewables being built worldwide.
Mm.
So there is a huge amount of increase in nuclear. And then Japan just restarted their high temperature gas cooled test reactor. So Japan, right, side of Fukushima, they're restarting their nuclear.
Okay.
So Ukraine is looking at expanding their nuclear. So the nations that have the 2 worst nuclear accidents are going, yeah, we need this stuff still. So
How do you extract uranium? Are you extracting this from the earth? Are
yeah,
you
it's a metal that's just found in the earth. Have you heard the term yellow cake?
no?
So yellow cake is a powdered form of uranium that's unrefined, and then you refine it into so the process, and I'll go through this process to how they enrich it, and they transform it into a gas called uranium hexafluoride, and then they spin it in centrifuges, right? So you hear the term centrifuges thrown a lot. Iran has some of these, and that basically makes the heavier uranium, which is uranium 238. It separates out to the outside, and uranium 235 separates the inside. Uranium 235 is standard nuclear fuel for the reactors we use in the United States. They process these gases back into solids. The United States Army loves our depleted uranium, the uranium 238. They make rounds out of it. They make tank armor because it's heavy and dense. And then the uranium 235 goes and gets put into reactors to be fueled.
Mm,
Now,
mm.
that uranium 238 can become nuclear fuel.
Okay.
So if I put that uranium 238 into a reactor, and we do, so when I say enriched, natural uranium is 0.7 of the 235 and 99.3% of the 238. A commercial reactor in the US uses somewhere between 2 to 5% U-235, with the remainder being uranium 238. That uranium 238 is in a neutron flux because nuclear reactors produce neutrons, and they'll absorb a neutron. It doesn't split. It's now excited, wants to give off energy. Well, it releases an electron from the nucleus of the atom, and now it's neptunium.
Mm,
Neptunium, well, it absorbs the neutron, becomes uranium 239, releases that little electron,
mm-hmm,
an electron, and now it's neptunium 239. And
mm,
then a few days later, it releases another electron. It becomes plutonium 239,
mm,
which is fuel.
mm.
So I could put that fuel in, say, a sodium cooled reactor like the BN 800 in Russia, and now I can power it. So if you use numbers, and I'm sure your audience would love to hear this, if we went to peak power demand, and I was talking with the CEO of Lightbridge, which is a nuclear fuel company. He says peak power demand that they expect for planet Earth is 21,000 gigawatts of continuous energy. So you need 21,000 nuclear reactors to do that. So they're
Okay.
expecting, if we were 100% powered from nuclear energy, 21,000 reactors, we have 450, it's 10% of the planet's power. So this is 5 times the power that we actually have right now.
Mm, mm,
We have 1,000 years of uranium 235 available to us.
wow.
If we use
Insane.
a fast reactor that uses that plutonium, we have 250,000 years.
Wow.
If I use thorium, I add 750,000 years. I have 1,000,000 years of energy available.
Who discovered this science of radioactivity?
There's a lot of people, but if you go to the heavier elements on your periodic table, you'll see you'll see names like seaborgium and curium. They're named after the people that discovered a lot of this stuff. Madame Curie,
Okay.
whom the term for radioactive material, the Curie, came from.
Okay.
Seaborgium, he's a Danish man. There's a company called Seaborg Technologies that they have a liquid salt reactor, molten salt reactor that they're designing. So it's a lot of European and U.S. scientists for the most part. There's even Einsteinium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. How
So
many elements are there?
113 now, I think. I'm
There-
not. I'm not sure.
yeah,
It keeps updating. They keep finding more.
it's 144.
Is it 144? All right.
But we just haven't discovered them all. Don't ask me how I know
Okay.
that. I can't tell you. If I tell you, I have to eliminate you. I have to neutralize
You
you.
have to eliminate me. All right. I was in the military. I won't ask any more questions. 144. You know that actually. I'm gonna step up and see what my chart has up here. This is an outdated chart, so
Okay.
I have 118 on my chart,
Okay.
um, and they keep discovering new ones. I've been to
Yeah.
the lab that actually creates that. It created that charge. I spent 6 weeks there being trained
Okay.
to actually work on my little submarine back there. They taught me how to
Nice.
operate it.
Okay.
So yeah, it was super
Dope.
cool.
Dope.
I've done some cool stuff as far as it's one of the things that's interesting is this is a fun story to tell. I did a year where I played soldier. I was a Navy fish out of water, and I carried a rifle around like a soldier. I did a convoy in Iraq. I was all over the country, right? All over, Iraq and Kuwait. Scariest thing I've ever done is an emergency reactor startup on a submarine.
Way scary to be in Iraq.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh my God.
I literally I can't get into the details because of the classified nature of some of this stuff.
Right.
But I had an event that occurred where literally I was giving some stupid nomenclature about something, and I go, "Oh my God, shimming out!" And I was like, and then I went to the bathroom later, and I crapped out 5 diamonds because I had that much pressure and freaking in my rectum. It was freaking yeah. I have literally the most, and I think it was more. I don't think I would have broke the reactor and would have caused a problem, but it was just that the sudden change in energy that I didn't expect in that plant. And the military reactors are operated extremely differently than commercial reactors,
Uh,
right? The change in power level you do on a commercial reactor is done over days. I could do that in 30 seconds on a aircraft carrier submarine. So
okay.
very different type of operation. Commercial reactor, very slow, controlled approaches. You
Yeah.
know, you make a change of 1 or 2% of power. It's you bring in extra people. I mean, we did this thing out of a Liberty call in freaking Hawaii, right? And we're pretending like the hurricane is coming, and you intentionally put yourself at a pressure and temperature that's challenging to
Okay.
challenge yourself. So that's yeah.
Oh
So
wow. Let's get into some super chats. Thank you, everybody. Kristen Mana, 199 super chat. Thank you, Kristen. Always holding me down. Love, love, love you. GRS said, really enjoying the program tonight. Can't wait to share it with my teen daughter and encourage her into the nuclear program. Hell yeah. I'm about to talk to my kids about this. David Muschetti, excellent breakdown. I think another topic of concern to cover for people concerned with nuclear energy would be the rad waste processing. And then I have another person here says, Just Blaze. What up, JB? He says, what are your thoughts on cold fusion? So we're talking about rad waste processing and cold fusion. What do you know about this stuff?
all right. I am not an expert in fusion. So fission, we take a big heavy element, we split it. Fusion, we take small elements down in that hydrogen helium range, we fuse them together, and it makes a lot of heat and energy. That's how the sun works. As far as I know, that there's a lot of things with fusion going on, but it always seems like it's 30 years away, right?
Mm.
Although I think there was a recent thing where they're saying we're going to beat Gen 4, and I'm like, well, you're kind of behind already because the Russians are doing it. Sorry, they've been doing it since 2016, so you're behind. It's just getting the others caught up.
Russians have been doing what?
Operating a Gen 4 reactor.
Okay.
So you got different generations, right? So
Right.
Gen
Right.
1 were the test reactors. We actually melted a bunch of those down in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gen 2 is the large scale reactors that the US has, designed in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s, slide rules, right? Gen 3 designed in the 90s, Gen 4 designed recently. And the difference between them all is there's an increased level of safety. So at Gen 3, I've got 3 days to get, reestablish my cooling mechanisms. Gen 4 is unlimited. I can go forever. I can basically walk away and it's safe.
Wow.
You know, and
Wow.
a lot of them are designed where you can, operate 30 reactors from a room hundreds of miles away. That's one of the things. As far as the radioactive waste, I think was the question. So waste is defined in basically two types. You've got low level and high level waste. So the low level waste is basically it's things that develop radioactivity because it's passing through the reactor core that's emitting these neutrons and they absorb it. And so, this is stuff. But they don't have a very long half life. meaning they won't last very long. So that's the majority of the waste. Most of that waste, honestly, is gloves and all that protective clothing that I have, right? So, and we just basically, you just sit it out there, and it over like 20 years, it goes away,
Okay.
right? And it's gone. It's gone, and you can basically go deal with that. Then you have your high level waste, right? And this is the stuff that's really dangerous for about 100 years. And then after 100 years, you can walk up and lick it. Now, the quantity of that, if I took all that waste in the United States, right, and I stuck it on a football field, it'd be 50 feet deep.
Wow.
So peak nuclear, as far as for energy for the United States, was 40% was peak percentage. We had our best year in 2019, most amount of power generated, with 96 reactors in 2019. So we've been doing this for 70 years, right? 70 years, and our entire waste footprint is that. And we put them in these storage containers. Storage containers are rated for 300 years.
Okay.
You can walk up and hug them. It won't hurt you.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Okay.
I mean, they're not, I mean, it's inside, right? If you were,
Right.
now, if the fuel was exposed,
Yeah.
Usain Bolt couldn't even run up to it before it would kill him.
Okay.
But it's inside these containers that provide shielding. They use concrete and steel as shielding, and you could walk up to those containers and hug them. But in 100 years, you don't have to worry about it. It would basically be radiation levels that you could easily manage. So,
Interesting. Interesting. So the waste is going into basically a garbage bin that you guys call containers.
yeah, it's a big garbage bin. But again, that waste, right? I can use, that waste can be used as fuel, which is what the Russians are using.
Yeah. So it's not a complete waste.
Yeah, it's not a complete waste. Well, and the waste stream that comes out of, say, like the lithium fluoride molten salt reactor that the question was before, the waste stream that comes out of that, because you can consume 100% of the fuel, whereas our current reactors don't do that. Your waste streams only, will last up to 300 years in length, and it's, all not radioactive after 300 years. Whereas right now, the big constituents of concern is really the plutonium, which lasts for about 25,000 years. You got to go 5 to 10 half-lives before it's gone. So now you're looking at, 250,000 years, right? That's a long time. But if I consume that plutonium, it's got basically the same waste stream as a thorium reactor, right? I went through and when I was doing all my research and learning how these advanced reactors work, basically they create the same waste at the end product.
Yeah.
But that waste isn't as bad as you think, right? So I like using, this is my great descriptor for it, is I put 100 tons of fuel into a reactor, right? And I consume it in a Gen 4 reactor, whether it's thorium or plutonium reactor. I consume all that waste, right? It came out of a pressurized water reactor. I had 100 tons of waste. I could take 60 tons of that reactor's waste, of that Gen 4 reactor, and I can throw it away because it's not radioactive.
Wow.
Immediately coming out, right?
Yeah.
So I've already reduced my waste by over half.
Yeah.
25% of that remaining waste has useful applications in industry and the medical industry. Right? So now I have 25 tons that I want to use. You want cancer treatments, right?
Yeah.
You want radiography for checking welds in, say a ship or on, a high-rise building, right? Making sure that you don't have flaws in the metal so that you don't cause a building to collapse or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? So, you need this stuff so it has a useful purpose. And then the remaining 15 tons may only last for 300 years. Here's the coolest thing that the industry is coming up with: diamond nuclear batteries. So I could take that waste. It's radioactive. Radioactive means it releases energy. I create some form of a solar panel kind of thing around it, and it absorbs that energy and creates electricity. And so imagine you have a battery that could last for 300 years.
Wow. I need one of those.
Yeah, I want one too. And Now NASA is actually using that. Just this last week, the U.S. Department of Energy delivered the power supply for the new Mars mission. The
Mhm.
rover is going to be nuclear powered, so it's going to run
Mm,
off of a similar system. It's going to run off of a nuclear battery that's going to last for, probably several hundred years.
mm. Wow, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Daniel Hawk said, I got a 97 on the ASVAB, and I really messed up not staying in the Navy longer than 27 days. Dumbest choice in my life. Damn, Daniel. Damn, Daniel. Anybody remembers that? Damn, Daniel. Hey, man, mistakes that we learn from, man. It's all good. So before we part, let me just ask you, in summary, you talked about black folks getting into this thing. How can black people get into this industry without a college degree and without going into the military? Is there still a way to do that? Because you said this
there,
other guy went from
yeah,
sweeper.
yeah, there is. Well, big thing is you got to stay off drugs, and that includes marijuana.
Okay.
Right? Marijuana. If you pop on a drug test in my industry and on the commercial side, it's a 5-year ban for your first offense, permanent ban for second.
Gotcha.
All right. If you go to the military side, it's permanent. One
Okay.
pop and done. All right. So you got to stay off drugs, and that includes marijuana. And I understand marijuana is legal in a lot of states. And my cousin, whose name is Rob Schneider, is a big guy in the cannabis industry out west. I went to visit him, and every single person I met out there was like, I told him I can't use it. I would love to, but I can't. I would lose my job.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, you're dealing
So
with nuclear energy. You don't want
yeah,
somebody that's high.
yeah, I agree with that. All right.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing. The second thing is that there are other methods to get in there. So Newport News Shipbuilding is a great pathway to get in there. And this is a great thing, a great plug that I will do this for is that they have what's called the apprentice school. So it's almost like a hybrid with that getting your degree and not having to pay anything for it. Um, we had a babysitter. Her husband went through 8-year program, got a 4-year bachelor's degree, engineering degree from through Old Dominion University. Didn't pay a dime for it,
Mm.
right? So you have to have for this you have to have your high school diploma. You can go online if you Google have any of your listeners. They Google Huntington Ingalls Industries, Newport News Shipbuilding Apprentice School, right? And you go in there. So it's basically you get double the time to do your degree because you're going to work as a trades worker. You may be you may be hauling ventilation trunks. You may be helping carry tools. You may be sweeping up floors, right?
Yeah, you
To
gotta do your
start off
grunt. You
with,
gotta do your grunt work. You gotta put your time in.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you start out at the bottom and you work your way up. And at the same time, they're sending you to classes, right?
Right.
I have a coworker named Rob. That's how Rob got into the commercial industry. Was he
Mm.
started out in the apprentice school at Newport News Shipbuilding, right? And he was doing all this stuff. They were sending him to the community college. First 2 year, the associate's level is all through the community college. Bachelor's levels all through Old Dominion University, and he went to Thomas to the community college, and he was taking one of the classes. He took his resume to one of the ladies there, applied for the job in that foundations program. We'll talk about that again, how Carlos did it, and she smoothed it out, just because he was a guy from here, sent his resume, and he gets brought into you know work at the power plant out at Surrey, right? So a foot in the door in any of these industries. And I don't know if the shipyard up in the electric boat shipyard up in New London, Connecticut has a program, but I would imagine they do. They just signed a big submarine contract for the Columbia class submarine. I'm sure they're hiring, right? But getting your foot in the door um, in anything, right, helps you get that experience. They have programs that are very similar for their shipyard workers because they need what are called, in the nuclear industry, we call them licenses. They have shift test engineers, which is the equivalent for the US Navy, where you're going through and learning how a nuclear reactor works. It's a high paying job too. Maybe not $200,000 a year, maybe more like 120, 130, but um, you also don't operate the ship. The Navy does that. You can walk away. So the Navy gets to do really all the hard stuff. Like if there's a hurricane, I may have to go live at the plant. If there's a hurricane at a shipyard, you get to go flee the area. The Navy guys get to stay behind. So there's a little benefit there. And then the other one is, like the way Carlos did it is you start in, and there's, I think if you go outageworker.com, O-U-T-A-G-E worker.com, you can start into the commercial industry as an outage worker. It may be $12 an hour sweeping floors, and you may have to bounce from site to site. And here's something that's really cool. There are outage workers that work the spring and the fall because that's outage season, and they live off of the money throughout the other seasons. So they work basically 6 to 7 months a year and have the rest of the time off.
Okay.
Because they're working 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts typically.
Okay.
When they're on an outage.
Right.
And you can get not just into operations, you can get into HP technicians or the health physics, the radiation protection, mechanics, electricians, welders, all that stuff. You can get into those companies like Day and Zimmerman, BHI. You go into them, you start at the low trade, all that stuff. And if there's anybody who has more questions with that, my direct messages are open so I can feed this information to people that are interested. And I mean, there are some of the coolest people are these. So when you do an outage, you shut down a unit, you'll bring anywhere from 800 to 2,000 people in to your into the plant, right? So you bring a lot of people in for a short period of time because when the reactor's shut down, you're not making money, right? Because you got to sell power to the grid. Yeah. So you bring all these people in, you disassemble it and reassemble it. I mean, we have this lady, Carol, sweetest little old, she's like everyone's grandma. She operates the elevator and the containment. Like that's her job, right? She makes probably $12 an hour, in her 60s, operating the elevator.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so there's a lot, it doesn't, high school diploma. Actually, some of those you may not need a high school diploma for.
Right.
So, but there's a lot of travel.
Okay. A lot of travel. Okay.
A lot of travel. Yeah. And it can be international.
So you'll see the world.
Yeah. You could go to France. France has nuclear reactors. They got 55, I think. So you got to, you go out to France, you go to Japan. We actually had a worker that was working my last outage that he and his mom were working it. They were from Cancun. He goes, we make so much money, we live like kings.
Yeah, definitely in Cancun.
Yeah.
Wow.
He goes, they pay for my visa, bring me up here. They pay for all my training.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Mark, thank you very much for coming on today. I'm going to disseminate this information to everybody and make sure everybody sees this. I'm going to have family and friends check this out. Appreciate you coming on. Everybody, Mark Schneider.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
No problem, man.